Today on Would You Believe It? Discover incredible shapes carved in the California desert, messages to visitors from other worlds. Hear the story of America's biggest mass execution and the proof of one man's innocence, the handprint on the wall. Travel to the battlefields where the mob fought an unbelievable war and lost. Visit the strange, the bizarre, and the unexpected on Would You Believe It? The mysterious desert, one of the last frontiers yet to be conquered by man. But man has been here and left his mark. These symbols, created by an ancient culture, are all that is left to indicate their presence. Could they also be a sign that when man was here, he was not alone? But these shapes in the desert are not on the plains of Nazca, Peru, where desert figures have been linked to UFO visitations. This long-lost civilization lived only an hour's flight from one of our most modern cities, Los Angeles, California. These are the giant figures of the lower Colorado River, a concentration of geoglyphs etched into the desert's scorched plains. Images of humans and animals are found here atop the mesas that stare down at the Colorado River. While no one is certain who made them, the question is, why? And more puzzling, how? What's amazing is that nothing overlooks this mesa. All of these colossal figures can only be seen from the air. Whoever sculpted these figures created designs which only gods or birds could see. The sheer scale of the glyphs is startling. This serpent at Blythe near Yuha Mesa is over a mile long. Expert archaeologist Jay van Werlhof has made extensive studies of this region. Working from his office on a proposed museum site, he has concluded that these giant effigies were the work of the Yuman-speaking native tribes who settled these banks along the Colorado.
Yuha Mesa is one of the most powerful of the areas around here. It's a sacred land. It has 21 geoglyphs on it, 3 of which are extremely important. It was a spiritual thing. It was for spiritual purposes that these were made. An outline appeared in the shaman's dream, and he would take a large rock and put it at each key point. And then smaller rocks were placed to fill that in, very much like children have on the kids' page of the Sunday paper, with little dots, and you take a pencil and fill it in and have a picture.
However they were created, it is still unclear exactly who made them or where they came from.
It's not really known for sure just how long ago the first people came into this area, but we certainly have evidence that it goes back to at least the San Dieguito culture, which in some places has been identified as some 12,000 years old, but around here we think it's probably around 10.
Some say early man came to North America from Europe and Asia, across the Bering Straits, to explore and settle this new and fertile land. A groundbreaking new theory is the Peruvian Incas from South America may not have died out as widely thought. Some anthropologists are now researching the possibility that they actually migrated northwards, becoming the very tribes who settled the areas of North America. One of these early settlers may have been Yuha Man, whose remains were discovered buried here 20 years ago. This is a cast of Yuha Man's skull, reconstructed from thousands of tiny fragments. In the 1970s, he was dated as being 5,000 years old. Modern techniques would be used to ensure accuracy, but just as scientists were uncovering his importance, his remains were stolen. The mysterious circumstances in which he vanished has led some to believe this part of the desert may hold a greater significance to humans than perhaps we are ready or allowed to accept. It's now suggested the exodus of these people ended in the abandoned cliff city of Mesa Verde to the north. The inhabitants became known as the Anasazi, or the Ancient Ones. Their precise identity is still unknown. But whoever they were, it's thought their ultimate destination was much further away. Mesa Verde has been linked with stories of beings descending from the sky, of shimmering golden vehicles which transported man from here to other worlds. Like the Peruvians, these early Californians could have been trying to communicate with someone or something they saw above them. According to popular notions, the glyphs acted as landing sites for extraterrestrial craft. Even visible through the atmosphere, the vast areas of desert displaying the glyphs stand out against the surrounding Earth. The similarity between the glyphs of South America and those in California can be seen here in the Imperial Valley. This giant snake's dimensions are comparable in size and shape to those in Nazca, often referred to as runways.
These geoglyphs were certainly not intended for anyone out there. A concept is becoming more and more popular as UFOs are sighted, but it was a spiritual exercise and part of their mythology that has nothing whatsoever to do with people-to-people communication.
One controversial idea is the shaman meditated into a trance as the ceremony reached its peak, then astrally projected himself from his body high above the tribe. This figure of a female is 140 feet long and 80 feet wide, too large and indistinct from ground level for the builders to have possibly visualized without help. So maybe they were aided or inspired by something that was able to fly over the site. With thousands of recent UFO sightings in Mexico and famous crash site Roswell to the east, it could be aliens already have some historical connection with these lands. Could these faces in the desert even be those of a visiting race? Experts think a few miles away from the geoglyphs, a crumbling mesa holds the key: petroglyphs. Carved into huge rocks by the same settlers, many accept these could be test designs for the full-sized glyphs. What archaeologists believe to be prayer circles, pounded into the ground by feet during ceremonies, actually appear here in these petroglyphs as part of the designs on the rocks. These might in fact represent planets or orbits, which form star maps containing information only available to us in the last 20 years. It's clear to everyone that many strange patterns evoke images of great power, but to some, they also represent craft and even the humanoid visitors themselves. J. von Werloff's more earthbound studies, however, have deduced these carvings are symbolic icons relating to the everyday lives of the natives. Jay doesn't subscribe to these new UFO theories, preferring instead to dedicate his time to documenting the ever-increasing number of glyphs found in the region. He discovered the petroglyph he's sketching here only moments before filming began, showing us while these people may have disappeared centuries ago, we still have much to learn about them. Jay finds this kind of excitement enjoyable enough, taking delight in the facts he can study and prove, rather than these UFO theories he knows he cannot. He is one of a small group of people spearheading plans to preserve this region, so one day we will all be able to learn their true secrets. Until then, the giants scratched in the earth continue to stare up at us, still begging the same questions. If you find these new UFO theories hard to believe, if we choose to believe the archaeologist, perhaps the most amazing fact of all is while we are able to look down on these symbols and be astounded, the people who created them never even got to see them. Would you believe it? On the bitterly cold morning of December 21, 1935, Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, flanked by 25 police officers, stood in front of a crowd of 300 vegetable packers at the Bronx Terminal Market. He then read his proclamation. As of December 26th, he would be banning the sale, display, and possession of New York's fastest-growing import. It was a product that had been brought over by Italian immigrants. Now it was being shipped in from fields in California to keep its users well stocked. Mayor LaGuardia himself even confessed to having enjoyed this highly contentious substance. The product was the cause of a virtual war between rival mafia families. It was $1 million a year criminal racket that involved extortion, violence, kidnappings, and murder. Now, over 60 years on, the hysteria has died down, and the product that once supported gangster empires is grown brazenly in fields surrounding the small California town of Castroville. Today, the product finds its way into homes across America. But these farmers are not renegade outlaws. The crop is a perennial type of thistle, a relative of the common sunflower, better known as the artichoke. Artichokes were first brought to America by Italian immigrants, hungry for a taste of home. They grew them in their gardens in San Francisco, which had an ideal climate for this strange vegetable. By 1927, there were over 50 growers in the artichoke business in this area, with virtually all the produce being shipped east to New York, where a large Italian population bought them by the ton. It was in 1930 that this innocent trade in vegetables caught the eye of the mob. Notorious New York gangster Ciro Terranova saw that this was a business he could use his strong-arm tactics to dominate, and he set to it with ruthless determination. Eastern importers were made offers they couldn't refuse, and Ciro soon had a stranglehold on the artichoke. Having reduced his competitors, he doubled his prices. Back in the fields, thugs stopped shipments and forcibly informed suppliers of their selling price. Either they accepted or the deal would go very sour. However, many of these hardened California farmers refused to cooperate. Gangs of thugs carrying machetes to back up their buying power invaded farms. Trucks carrying artichokes to market were ambushed and hijacked. Precious equipment was destroyed and stolen, and acres of plants were systematically slashed, then flambéed in bulk. The farmers fought back, forming gangs of artichoke vigilantes. These troubles became known as the Artichoke Wars. Tensions came to a head in November 1931 when a mob of vigilantes descended on the mob, trying to steal a shipment of artichokes. They fired on the getaway car as it screeched out of the farm and into the darkness. Eventually, LaGuardia's tenacious pursuit of the criminals paid off, and he made sure Ciro Terranova and his gangsters were the ones in hot water. The ban on importing artichokes into New York, meanwhile, was quickly repealed, causing celebrations across Monterey County, where farmers could once more hold their heads up high. And when they tried to give the vegetable a new face, it was this one, Norma Jean. To ensure mob rule would never return, the farmers installed a new ruler. The girl who was to become the queen of the big screen as Marilyn Monroe had begun as the queen of the artichokes. In a few short years, this humble vegetable had put away some of the most fearsome criminals in New York, gained popularity with a whole new public, and launched a movie star. Would you believe it? On June 21st, 1877, 10 men went to their deaths. It was the largest mass execution in America's history. And since that day, controversy has raged over whether justice was done. At the prison where 6 of the men died, a plaque now testifies to the mistakes that were made. But here, where the remaining 4 men died, the only evidence is this, known as the handprint on the wall. One of the most astounding stories in American history, transcending the link between the natural and the supernatural, and extending a ghostly reminder from ancient injustices to the present day. It is the story of 2 men, both hanged unjustly over 100 years ago, Alexander Campbell and Jack Keogh. For both men, their quest for justice continued long after their untimely deaths. June 21st, 1877, Maw Chunk, now known as Jim Thorpe, in the anthracite coal region of Pennsylvania. Inside this forbidding building, the Carbon County Jail, 4 men spent their last night on this earth listening to the terrible sound of their gallows being constructed. Then a noise even more fearsome, the testing of the gallows. Heavy sandbags being dropped at the end of a rope, which the next day would dispatch each of the condemned men in turn. Every time a sandbag dropped, the sound echoed around the prison. In each cell, every man knew what that sound meant. That night, a schoolmaster from nearby Hazleton brought a group of children. Far from being awed by the solemn spectacle, the children danced on the scaffold as the wives and children of the condemned men looked on and wept. Finally, the men were alone. Alexander Campbell, Michael J. Doyle, John Donahue, and Edward Kelly. Each man waited out the night and prayed. In a small town like Maw Chunk, a hanging was always a big event. Tomorrow would be remembered for a long time. In nearby Pottsville, the carnival atmosphere of Maw Chunk was more somber. Here behind these forbidding walls, 6 men were also to die that same day. Thomas Duffy, James Carroll, James Rorty, James Boyle, Hugh McGeehan, and Thomas Munley. Each man had been tried and found guilty of murder or accessory to murder. They had been arrested as a result of an undercover operation by the Pinkerton Detective Agency, hired by the Philadelphia and Reading Coal and Iron Company. According to prosecutors, the ringleader was Alexander Campbell. Campbell had been a miner and then a hotel owner, convicted of accessory to several murders. Historian Patrick Campbell is the grandnephew of the condemned man.
Before Alec Campbell left this particular cell to go to his execution, he, according to legend, turned around and placed his hand on this particular spot on the wall and swore his innocence and said that this particular handprint would remain on that wall to prove that Carbon County was hanging an innocent man. And it has remained there ever since.
The handprint on the wall is one of the most astounding phenomena in the world of the paranormal. Yet even more incredible are the events which led to its creation. Events which led to the injustices of June 21st, 1877. On that day, 10 men went to their deaths, all proclaiming their innocence.
The actual morning of the execution, they were very calm as they walked up to the gallows and had very little to say as they were dropped into the next world.
Laboring in a mine was a tough way to earn a living. For many immigrants, it was the only way they could get by. Wages were low and the shifts long. In some towns, workers were not even paid in dollars, but in scrip, to be used in the company store, where prices were invariably high. Often they ended a week having earned $5, but owing the company $7.
Being down in the dark for 12 hours out of your day, not seeing the light of day, that plays on you for a while. First of all, it's the condition of the mines, being in the dark. I mean, there are no lights in the mine, except for the lamp on your head.
At a time when trade unions were unheard of, and when worker benefits consisted of having your body dumped on your front porch if you were killed in a mine accident, the miners banded together for protection. Most small mines had been driven out of business by the larger companies, who also owned the railroads. It was against these powerful organizations that the fledgling unions pitted themselves. The organizers tended to be the more educated men of the community.
Well, Alex Campbell and my great-grandfather both ran taverns, and the tavern was the center of the community for the Irish miners. They didn't have any kind of cultural centers or halls of any other type of meeting place.
Joe Wayne's great-grandfather was Jack Kehoe.
Quite frankly, because of their education, they were looked up to by the other miners. They could read, they could write. They were older than a lot of the men who were involved.
Campbell and Kehoe were indifferent to the problems that the power structure out here had with their activities. They thought they were here in America, that nothing could happen to them.
Kehoe and Campbell had mine owners worried, so they responded by hiring armed guards to act as a private police force. Franklin Gowan, president of the largest mine company in the area, went one step further. He engaged a private detective agency started recently by Alan Pinkerton. Together, they would bring down the miners. Instead of openly attacking the Union, Pinkerton and Gowan planned a covert operation. It was claimed that the Molly Maguires were a secret terrorist organization. Gowan used the media to spread fear and tell people believed the anthracite coal region was under attack from the Molly Maguires, and something had to be done.
You had Alan Pinkerton advertise throughout his ranks for anybody of Irish descent who knew anything about Irish secret society. And the one who presented the most definitive story on them was a fellow by the name of James McParland.
It was McParland who was responsible for bringing the Molly Maguires to the gallows.
McParland came into the area and portrayed himself as being a wanted criminal for passing a queer counterfeit money, and also wanted for murder in upper state New York. He was alleged to have been a great drinker and fighter.
When McParland, alias James McKenna, arrived in Schuylkill County, he headed straight for this tavern frequented by the Irish miners. He made himself known to the bodymaster of the local chapter of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, thought by the Pinkertons to be the cover for the Molly Maguires. Jack Kehoe was one such bodymaster, and Alec Campbell was another. McParland befriended Campbell, but this friendship ended when McParland revealed himself to be an undercover agent and accused Campbell of 2 murders. The first murder took place here in Tamaqua. The victim was policeman Benjamin Yost. Yost was known to have many enemies among the miners of Tamaqua, many of whom he had arrested at some time. He was gunned down at this street lamp and was carried into his home, where he died in the early hours of the morning. The 2 men arrested, Hugh McGeehan and James Doyle, were not from Tamaqua and had no reason to be there. They had a gun and empty shells in their pockets and were leaving the area in a hurry. Also with them when they were arrested was James Powder Keg Kerrigan, who would turn state's evidence, and it was on his testimony that much of the prosecution's case depended. As alleged leader of the local chapter of the Molly Maguires, Campbell was accused of masterminding the murder. The next murder victim was mine owner John P. Jones. Again, the case rested on the evidence of McParland, corroborated only by Kerrigan's unreliable testimony. Campbell was accused of ordering the killing from his hotel here in Summit Hill. In both cases, McParland admitted that he knew of the murders before they happened, but made no effort to stop them. He had his orders. Crimes must be committed so arrests can be made. Campbell was also convicted of accessory to the murder of Morgan Powell, shot outside the McFadden store, still in the family to this day. Once again, the case rested on McParland, the man who had been commissioned to break the Union. Presiding over the trial was Judge Samuel Dreyer, a personal friend of Gowan and of local steel magnate Asa Packer. Prosecuting for the state was none other than Franklin Gowan, the man who years later would boast that he had spent over $4 million to break the miners' labor organization. The jury didn't take long to reach their verdicts. Alexander Campbell never had a chance. His last act before he was taken to the gallows was to leave his handprint on the prison wall, saying that it would remain there until the day when his name was cleared. For James McParland, the job of bringing down the Molly Maguires was not yet over. Now he turned his attention to the man considered to be the leader of the Irish community, Jack Kehoe. He was an elected constable and owner of this tavern, which is still in the Kehoe family. By the time McParland had finished with him, Kehoe would hang as a murderer, accused of a crime that was committed 15 years earlier. Kehoe had gone up against Gowan, and now he would pay the price.
Why dig up this crime 15 years after the fact? I look at it as not a conspiracy of the Molly Maguires to kill the mine owners, but rather a conspiracy against the Irish Americans who are involved in unionized labor, which is a whole new concept in American history of that era.
It was impossible to prove Kehoe's guilt or innocence. The trial was a matter of conflicting hearsay and 15-year-old memories. But due to Gowan's manipulation of the media and the courts, Kehoe's guilt or innocence was immaterial. What mattered most was that he was said to be a Molly Maguire.
By the time John Kehoe's trial had been put on, all the media attention was already focused on the guilt of the Molly Maguires. Up to that point, they were all guilty. So once you label a man a Molly Maguire, chances are he will be found guilty.
The entire setup for my great-grandfather and 19 other men who danced the macabre death at the end of a rope was private industry. You had a private corporation in the form of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad and Coal and Iron Company. You had private detective force in Allen Pinkerton. You had the various coal companies who used the coal and iron police, not affiliated in any way with the Commonwealth or with the county or any local government. And you had a prosecutor at their trials, came right from the coal companies. The only thing a public official, or the only thing public about it was that the taxpayers provided the courtroom and they provided the jail cell. The fact was Jack Kehoe was considered the head of the Molly Maguires, and you had to get rid of the head. And regardless of who came up and testified, they were going to find him guilty.
Jack Kehoe went to the gallows proclaiming his innocence. 100 years later, his great-grandson Joe Wayne presented the details of the case to the governor of Pennsylvania in the hope that justice would be done and his great-grandfather would finally be able to rest in peace.
We got a call from the governor. We couldn't be there because of the inclement weather, and he stated he was ready to sign the pardon. And after a brief pause, he stated that a pardon of this nature would not be necessary today if justice was done 100 years ago when an innocent man came to trial. And as I say, the party started, and it lasted about 4 days.
For Jack Kehoe, justice has finally been done. A plaque has been erected outside the prison where he was hanged, admitting that mistakes were made. But Alexander Campbell is still waiting. When Campbell made this print, it was his wish that his innocence be remembered. It has survived 120 years of attempts to scrub it off and even paint over it. Laboratory tests at Penn State University have determined that it doesn't contain any paint or dye pigment or oils from the hands of the many visitors. According to science, the handprint on the wall doesn't exist. The truth will probably never be known, But as long as visitors to the prison see the handprint and ask about the 10 men who were sent to their death that fateful day in 1877, Alexander Campbell's legacy will remain.